Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome from a sunny Mallorca. Well, I'm in Mallorca. Where are you, Ted?
I'm across in Fort Lauderdale, Onno.
Fort Lauderdale. And Sarah?
In Hampshire in the UK.
And Paul? Paul, you have to put your sound on, buddy, otherwise we cannot hear you. So where are you, Paul?
I'm from Cornwall in the UK.
Well, we're from all over the place, and I see that we've got Kalina from Finland, we got Mallorca, we got a lot from Mallorca this morning. Lynn is here, I know she's in the south of France. So we're from all over the world, and we're excited to have you guys here, the Superyacht training group. Great bunch of people, and but very new to the industry, right? So I think the best way to introduce yourselves is to play a video of what the Superyacht training group does. It's under 2 minutes, folks, so just hang in there because it's very interesting to know what they are offering. And then afterwards, they will do 3 sessions. Ted will start with his chat, then Paul takes it over, and Sarah is going to rock it off, talking about introverts and extroverts. So we're all going to find out who we are. It's going to be a great session. They're very well prepared. But let's see the video first. And we'll mute ourselves so we don't interfere with the sounds.
Not a lot happening there, chaps.
Hey guys, I get some notes in the chat that the video is not loading and not showing, so I'm putting us back on air because obviously people want to look at a blank screen. So okay. So I'm sorry about that. That's a bit of a misfortune. Sorry, if you will join us again, let's before we start, is that let's see if we can explain a little bit what the Superyacht training group does by talking to each other, right?
Do you want me to kick off with that one?
Yes, please, go for it, Ted.
Okay, right, yeah. Superyacht training group. It's a group of 12 companies that have been in the superyacht business for many times, for many years, I should say. We've kind of unofficially been working together on various projects over the last 12 years. And we decided to coalesce into an organization for several reasons. The main one was that when people are putting together a training program for a new or a rebuild boat, or a refit boat, sorry, there are an awful lot of disparate parts. There are different companies. There's Helidex, there's Mines Rescue, there's Crew Glue, there's everybody else. And all of those need somebody to coordinate that on board. And it's a mammoth task for captain, first officer, second officer. So we decided to put it together so you got one point of contact for the entire operation. And also, for purses, one invoice. So you don't have to chase 12 people up and get 12 different bank transfers and all of that kind of thing done. There's one point of contact. So that hopefully the organization of the training runs smoothly and easily and cohesively. So there is a lot less so that there is a lot less work required by the first officers. Sorry, I've just got emails coming in from clients here saying you're looking good. Thank you.
Well, that's kind of them, right?
Yes, yeah, that's from a boat in Amsterdam and one in Germany. So that's pretty good. Right, so we work together. We know each other. We know how we work. And from my point of view, because we're the film guys, we know how to film them. We know what's coming up. So we have lots and lots of experience in this organization. If we added it up, it'd be many, many years, which is quite embarrassing sometimes. But that's what we do. We're a group of 12 experienced companies covering most of the things that super yachts need for training, specializing, in new builds and refits, but also when you're fully operational. Is that good enough?
That's amazing. So I'm just saying, I'm taking it to centuries of experience.
Don't make it any worse than it is.
Yeah, there's nothing bad about it. And what we're talking about today is about taking advantage of the lockdown to improve procedures on board while enhancing crew welfare and guest safety. And Ted, you're going to be the first one to present. So I'm going to give you the stage, please. So go ahead. Everybody, use the chat. Keep popping in questions. If anybody, I will make sure that they're converted to the right person and that the questions are answered. Enjoy this webinar. It's going to be pretty cool. Ted, go for it.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a few notes here on my iPad, which I raise around place here. So if you see me looking away, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at my notes. So I'm Ted Fitzgerald. I run a company called Clear Blue Sky. We've been operating in the super yacht business for over 20 years. I formed Clear Blue Sky 25 years ago. We had a whole raft of people there working for us, 20 plus. And we started our work in the North Sea. Cold, grey, lumpy, doing stuff on oil rigs, rig supply vessels, tankers and helicopters. Prior to that, I was a teacher, and after that, in between that time, I worked for Apple UK for 10 years. Now, believe it or not, this is actually relevant to what we're talking about today, because when I was at Apple, we had fantastic machinery, great computers, a very young company in those days, and we had great products, but we were rubbish at selling them and delivering them and keeping people happy. Really, because we didn't have any procedures. So you see where this is going. And we had to grow the company and get ISO 9001 accreditation, which is what a big company has. It shows that you know what you're doing and you can deliver on your promises. So we went through that pain, and unfortunately, well, or fortunately, it was my job to do that, as well as being the new media manager and the regional sales manager. So it's quite a big job. So that taught me the importance of procedures, because we had clients like Shell, BP, GCHQ, Ministry of Defense, etc. Big clients who themselves had procedures that they ran. Now, you might be asking why is this important to you on a super yacht? I can hear that going on in the background saying, yes, why is this important to me on a super yacht? Right. Past experience has shown that procedures actually do work for a large organization, and a boat is a large organization because you're very big. It's a big boat. It's very expensive, and they often have a factor in there called an unpredictable boss. Now, none of this is too dissimilar from stuff that's shoreside. You've got very generally young, relatively inexperienced teams who are just starting out in their career. Complex systems, heavy machinery, lots of money at stake, high risk potential dangers under the pressure from management and owners, and high levels of service are demanded, so no excuses are accepted. Now, the end goal is simply, I feel, from my point of view, the end goal is to keep the clients and boss happy, so safety and training gets pushed down the list. But if the guests or clients are unsafe, you can bet they will not be happy. That's where procedures come in. Now, I will say that some of what I say might be controversial. It may cause a little bit of dissonance somewhere and a few disputes and get people talking, but that's good. Talking and thinking is good. So the procedures on a boat are not too dissimilar to procedures within a shore-based corporation. And these days, well, for the last 10 years, if you join a new position,
You're freezing, Ted. Am I the owner?
Yeah, Ted's frozen for me as well.
Yeah, Ted is frozen. It's like it's a long distance between Florida and Europe, right?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's need to make the mouse run faster.
I'm just gonna Ted will come back later. I'm just gonna hand it over to you, Paul, for now.
Oh, okay. That's a bit sooner than I thought. Okay, so my name is Paul Donaghy, and I'm with Helidex, and we provide consultancy and training for large yacht Helidex. And what I wanted to do today was just kind of run through where we are with Helidex on board yachts, and also some very hints and tips really on how to keep people safe and efficient when we have our guests on board. I understand that not every yacht has a helideck on board, but they are becoming more and more common. So I'm just going to run through a quick presentation. Please ask any questions you want, and hopefully you'll enjoy it, because lots of nice pictures, lots of nice helicopters, which is my favorite thing in the world. I'll just flash my slides up and we'll start. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, all good?
We're all good, thank you.
Okay, no problem. So a quick introduction. My name, as I said, my name is Paul, and my background is I'm ex-Royal Navy. I spent my career in the Navy working on many different types of military helidecks around the world, and I've got lots of different experience on both civilian and military helicopters, again, especially in the marine environment. I've been into yachting now for 10 years, believe it or not. It's been a long time. And in that time, I've provided consultancy and training for a lot of the world's most prestigious yachts and helidecks. Okay, I conducted the first MCA accredited training back in for large yachts back in 2011, and since then, I've had the misfortune of having to travel the world doing this job on many of the best yachts out there. So in this presentation, as I said, I'm going to look at some of the kind of problem areas which crop up, especially when we have guests and the boss on board, and maybe a few hints and tips on how we get around dealing with that. So we're definitely not on Kansas anymore, Toto, when it comes to helidecks on yachts. When I first started back 10 years ago, there was only a few aviation capable yachts. Okay, they tend to be the bigger yachts, everything over 100 meters. But in the space of 10 years, that has changed dramatically. Now we've got all sorts of yachts now who are operating helicopters, everything from sailboats with privately operated yachts, all the way through to the unstoppable march of the explorer yachts with their commercially rated helipads. Okay, so that means they can operate commercial charters with helicopters, and they're operating their helicopters right around the world in different environments. So it is a massive challenge when it comes to operating helicopters on board yachts. And again, last but not least, we've got the rise of the yachts with multiple helipads. Okay, so these are very large commercial pads which can take large helicopters, which make, again, heli operations on board yachts more and more complex as things go on. Okay, and again, that goes down to the type of helicopters we're using. You know, back in 10 years ago, there was only a handful of different types of helicopters, but now we've got all sorts of shapes, sizes, and all sorts of capabilities of these helicopters. And as they get bigger and bigger, the helicopters are becoming more of an integral part of the day-to-day use of the yacht. So you can see from the top there, we've got the small little helicopters which operate between 4 and 6 passengers, all the way down to the top, the bottom right there, which is the Airbus 175. Now, these helicopters now are being used on the larger yachts such as Dilbar and Flying Fox, and you can see they are massive helicopters. You know, 18 meters. They weigh over nearly 8 tons, and they can carry up to 18 passengers. So this is what is making super yacht aviation more complex and more challenging to yachts as time goes on. And again, the roles of the helicopter, back when I first started, it was VIB transport, but that is changing all the time. So we've now got not only VIP transport, we've got aerial filming, we've got helicopters which are lifting items for the owners. We've got things like tiki bars, disco equipment, you name it. They're using their helicopters to lift it into position for these different things they're doing. And also as well, medevac roles, so we can use the helicopter to then transfer any sort of casualties in the aircraft. And last but not least is the role of the helicopter. So we're having things like heli skiing, heli golf, heli diving. So the aircraft are getting fitted with specific equipment to help the owner achieve what he wants to do. So again, putting all these things together takes time, and it takes a lot of different procedures to make sure it's done safe and efficiently. So that's kind of just where we are with yachts and heli decks at the moment. So the next section, I'm just going to look at some of the pinch points, some of the problems I see every time I go into different type of yachts. And again, any questions, please don't hesitate. So my first thing is, please be prepared, okay? Always expect the unexpected when it comes to yachting, especially when we've got guests on board. And the biggest thing we can do to do that is give ourselves enough time to prepare. Now, with the amount of time I go into these big yachts now with multiple decks, it's very disconcerting when you're on finals to come to the helipad and you can see the crew putting the railings down, putting the equipment out as you're coming into land. Now, we need to give ourselves enough time to prepare. Now, this is very difficult when we have the owners and guests on board, because planning is difficult because things change within the space of a few minutes. But for example, a large yacht now, you're going to be looking at the region of 35 to 40 minutes to do these checks correctly to make sure that the helipad is fully safe for the aircraft to land, okay? And that brings me on to the next point, is we have yacht-specific procedures in place. Now, for commercial yachts, that's mandatory, okay? It comes as part of the certification. They need to have risk-assessed specific procedures in place for all aspects of the helicopter. But the problem we have with some of the private yachts who are not regulated at the moment, they don't have procedures in place. Or what tends to happen is the management companies will have generic procedures which they'll hand out to all their yachts within their management sphere. Now, the problem with that is if you have generic procedures, they don't pinpoint some of the issues we have with specific vessels, okay, positioning of the helipad, guest areas, and that's what we need to do. So it's very important that we have yacht-specific procedures in place, okay? And please, we use our checklist every time. It's not unheard of now with these big yachts. They're doing 15 to 20 heliops a day from morning dusk till night, okay? And it gets very routine. And what tends to happen is the crews, because they do it so often, they don't use the checklist anymore. So the checklist and the procedures are there to make sure that everything is safe and everything is put away and the yacht is fully ready in all respects for receiving the helicopter, okay? So, and they will help you out. In the event of an emergency or the event of having an accident, there will be a huge investigation. So by having checklists in place, it protects you guys as well as preventing accidents as well, okay? And we carry out all the checks on the approach path. Again, this goes back to our procedures. It is very difficult when we have heli decks on the back of boats where we have all the guest areas set up for guest operations. We have our breakfast bars, our discos, our inflatable slides. We have everything on the back of the boat. So again, we need to take time to make sure that all these kind of areas are checked and are safe for heli operators. I'll go into more detail just in a minute on another couple of slides. So take your time and get these done, okay? And again, when we are at guest operations, it is very difficult. We have limited manpower. We've got tenders in the water. We're running jet skis. So manpower, again, is very difficult. So having procedures in place is not only about safety, it's also about being efficient as well, efficient use of the crew and making sure that the helicopter doesn't dominate all aspects of the yacht. I mean, the yacht is there for the owners and his guests' benefit. We don't want to be shutting down the whole yacht just because we're using the helicopter, and that's what procedures help us do. If you think of it as a Formula One team, they drill and drill and drill every day to get those procedures honed, and that's what we need to be looking for when we're looking at operating these big helicopters on board yachts. And you can see again, on the new builds nowadays, they are changing their shape to accommodate the helicopter. A lot of the new Lursons, a lot of the new Fed ships are having the helipads on the front of the boat. And that allows us to operate the helicopter from the front and allow us to keep all the guest areas set up on the back. So it is a more flexible way of doing it. So that's why you see the big boats now tend to have their helipads on the front. Okay, so it just makes things easier. It's how design is increasing to accommodate helipads on board yachts. As I said before, most yachts over 80 meters now will come with some sort of helipad. It tends to be the new big thing for most owners. And again, the other problem we have is manpower. You know, you have quite a large boat, okay, with 50 crew, okay. You'll probably find that only between 10 and 12 of those will be deck crew. So it's very difficult when you're running tenders, when you're running guest operations, to supply enough manpower to the helipad. And I go on a lot of, especially private yachts, when they cut their manpower down to having one landing officer and one firefighter. It's not enough. If you have an accident or an incident on board, we need enough manpower to deal with the eventuality. So we do recommend a team of 5 if we can. I know that's controversial, but there's ways and means around this. It doesn't have to be the sole domain of the deck crew. We can train other members of the crew to help out on the helipad. So again, we can be flexible to make sure that we've got enough crew on the helipad. You know, in the event of an emergency, the assistants, okay, the guys who are assisting the HLO have a very important role. They're not just there to carry the baggage and help passengers get in and out of the helicopter. In the event of emergency, these guys will be assisting the firefighters. They'll be handling hoses. They'll be setting up hydrants and running emergency equipment. So it is quite important we have those in place. We don't want to wait until we've hit the emergency alarm and have to wait for a crew to come up from the interior to help. They need to be on station at all times. So please, if we can, have enough manpower on the heli deck at all times. There's no silver bullet, okay? And what I mean by no silver bullet, okay, it's these things here. A lot of commercial heli decks now have inbuilt firefighting systems. They're called deck integrated firefighting systems. These can either be pop-up nozzles, which come from the deck to provide foam and water. Looks like a big Ibiza foam party, but they're incredibly good at knocking down fires incredibly quickly. And some vessels have monitor systems, so fixed fire mains, which will, again, fire aspirated foam and water onto the deck to douse any flames. But the problem with those systems, they're fixed. They're fixed to a certain point on the deck. So if the helicopter crashes outside the area of the diff system or the monitor systems, we still need to set up our rest of our emergency equipment. I go to a lot of boats with diff systems and they don't set up any of their other firefighting equipment because they believe that the diff system is a silver bullet and it will put the fire out. It might not every single time. So what we've got to do is make sure that we lay out our emergency equipment at all times. Okay. And again, I won't go bore you with what that should be. There's quite a lot of equipment there, but we've got to make sure that all our emergency equipment is laid out so we can look at fires, okay, secondary fires. We can look at cooling the aircraft before we look at passenger rescues, all sorts of equipment we need to do that. And if we can do, we always put it out of view of guests. Now, this is a big pinch point again on a lot of yachts where some owners don't like the emergency gear being put out because it doesn't look nice. But if we can separate the yacht between an operational side and a guest side, okay, so port side for guests, starboard side for operations, it makes it a safe and efficient operation, right? It's just a touch and go helipad. I hear this all the time. It's such a touch and go. We don't need to do any procedures. We don't need to have any of the equipment out. That's not true, okay? There's no such thing as a touch and go. This is a term which was manufactured by yacht designers because they think they can get away with not having to design the helipads to certain standards or provide certain equipment, which is not true. There's no such thing as a touch and go pad. If the deck has been designed to land a helicopter, it's a heli deck. The risks are exactly the same. So we have our procedures in place. We have our equipment out. We have properly trained crew because the risk is exactly the same if you're operating a large commercial heli deck or the smallest private deck in the world, okay? And again, if you put a plywood lid over a jacuzzi, it doesn't make it a heli deck, trust me. Know your enemy, okay? This is probably the most important part, okay? The biggest problem we have on board yachts is the wind generated by the rotor system as the helicopter comes in land. This is called downwash. And the bigger, the heavier the helicopter, the more wind it generates, okay? And this plays havoc with anything which is loose underneath the approach path of the helicopter. It is the number one issue I've had in 10 years. If I had a euro for every crew which come to me and said, well, we've had a problem with seat covers, I could retire now, put it that way. I really could. But this is the major problem we have on yacht. It's called foreign object damage, okay? It's not just through yachts and helicopters. This is a massive issue throughout aviation. Airports around the world spend hundreds of millions of euros a year trying to prevent damage to aircraft because of loose equipment. And it's a massive problem on yachts. The problem we have, you can see when we're at guest operations, we have all these decks set up with all this beautiful equipment, which has been left out for the benefit of the guests. The problem is when it's loose, it has the ability to end up on the heli deck, go through the rotors and cause massive damage to the aircraft. Also, if it's a large item, if it goes through the rotors, it will end up crashing the helicopter. So it is the biggest issue we have on yachts. I tell all the crews I teach, you get loose articles right, heli operations will be fine, okay, every single time. The rest of it's relatively easy. But if you get loose articles wrong, it will be hideous, okay? You'll either be picking seat covers out of the water in tenders, or you'll be picking the aircraft out of the water when it's crashed. And that's how serious it is. So we need to get this right. So we drill to get these checks done. We get our procedures done properly and make sure the heli deck is safe. Now, this is not easy. We've got guests on board. We've got breakfast areas set up. We've got all sorts of things. It is about procedures again. You know, we need to have procedures in place to try and keep the guests happy and plus operate the helicopter at times. So it's a juggling act. It really, really is. And there's no easy answer to this. So all items of fodder must be picked up. Now, it's massively problematic with guest areas. So when we're at guest operations, we have all these beautiful furniture, beautiful equipment out on all our decks. Okay. So this, you see, this is a posh yacht. It's even got salted peanuts. Look, it must be a top class Charlie yacht, that one. But no, we've got towels, we've got all sorts of stuff all over these decks. And this is the equipment which will be damaged, which will be blown away and will cause accidents. So our checks and procedures must go through every single deck on the approach path of the helicopter to make sure they're safe. I've been on yachts and I've seen crew members lying over sofas to stop cushions going into the water, and it's not the way to do it. We need to have a middle ground between the owner's expectations and operating the helicopter, and it's not an easy line to meet. It really isn't. But I think most owners now who operate helicopters do understand they are a massive part of the yacht's operation nowadays, and there is some give and take. And this is what we're going to end up doing. If we get this wrong, we end up with what happened in 2018. Baccarella, okay, they lost their helicopter off the coast of Bergen because a tarpaulin went through the rotor system as it was hovering over the deck. The aircraft entered the water. Luckily, everybody survived, but they were badly hurt. And again, this was all down to a 2 meter square tarpaulin, which left the upper deck, went through the rotors and caused it to crash. All right. I'm not going to go into the weeds of this. I've got my own opinions. If you see me in a bar buying me a beer, I'll tell you all about this. It's really good, but this is not the time for it. But basically, we need to get these loose equipment put away because it is the number one issue with yachts. And as yachts get bigger and bigger and more complex and they're doing more, this is the major focus on what we've got to train and what we've got to get our procedures. There is a really good accident report which was released by the Norwegian Investigation Board. If anybody does kind of human factors training on board, it's a brilliant document to get hold of, because when it comes to accidents, it's never one factor. It's always a list of little things which build up to make the main accident, and it's brilliant. And the accident report lists all the failings, okay, to come to this point where we lost the aircraft. So it's really, really important that we get these checks done right. Okay, reaction speeds of a ninja. Okay, this is all about passengers now. Okay, one of the major problems we have is crowd control and dealing with passengers on the helipad. All right, and sometimes the HLO does need the reaction speed of a ninja because he needs to be on the ball at all times. So what we're going to try and do is try and escort our passengers from the aircraft wherever possible. So if the rotors are turning, okay, the helicopter's running, we escort our passengers. We control entry and access point to the helicopter. And of course, that's all done by the HLO. If we have guests who don't want to be escorted, then we can also look at putting assistants dotted around the helipad to give them a safe area to walk in and out the helicopter. This will protect them from any dangers of the helicopter and also things like falling over the side of the vessel and falling downstairs. So please always expect the unexpected and make sure that we kind of escort our passengers wherever possible around the helipad. The other one as well is we always obtain the pilot's or HLO's permission before we enter or leave the rotor disc area. Again, we're controlling who goes under the rotors when they're turning, because this is a dangerous area and we can't afford people just be walking around the helicopter, because there is a lot of dangerous elements of the helicopter we don't want them to touch or get near to. Okay, so the HLO helicopter landing officer will control all aspects of the helipad. And this is what you're going to watch out for. If we have helicopters land on and we don't have our crew in place at the doors, then what tends to happen is the passengers can exit the helicopter, become disorientated, don't know where they're going, and we end up with things like this. Okay, this passenger here got within half a meter of being decapitated by the tail rotor because they just don't see it. So we need to make sure that we have the passenger handling guys in position before the doors open, because once the doors open, it's a free-for-all. And it becomes like a game of whack-a-mole. It really, really, really does. Okay, so we need to concentrate and get our passenger handlers in place and keep our guests as safe as possible. So anyway, that's just a few pointers. It's not training any sort of specific points, but just things to think about when we are very busy, we're limited manpower, and we've got things going. And before I go, I just wanted to mention our other aviation partner within the Superyacht training group, which is Safeguard Helidex certification. So as Helidex, we provide the consultancy and training, okay, and Safeguard, another company, provide the inspection and certification of the Helidex. So again, they can't be here today, so they've asked me just to mention those guys. So that concludes my presentation for the day. I hope you enjoyed it, and please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get them. But I can talk about helicopters for years. I really can. So I've got to stop now. I really do. Okay. Thanks very much, guys.
Pleasure. So thank you so much, Paul. I think great session. Galina also said it's a great presentation, given he's saying that they don't have a helicopter yet, but the owner wants one on their next vessel.
Okay. Get in touch. Get in touch.
I bet. So I think it's very entertaining, very good. Finn says, thank you, very informative. So I think people are very excited. Welcome back, Pat.
Thank you.
We just changed the order a bit, and I'm going to maximize you again, put the people down in the corner, and then give you the stage again, if you don't mind, to continue.
Thank you very much. Yes, from very high-tech Florida, not. We've had internet issues. I don't know if it's a COVID thing or whatever, but we've had internet issues over here for the last 10 days. So I better get it over and done with, hadn't I? Okay, I'll jump back in here and skip a bit because Paul there went through quite a lot of the procedural side. And that's really what we check, that the procedures actually work. So when we get on board to film our training videos, we have to do it bespoke for every boat because, as people have mentioned, they are different. The only similarity between boats generally is that they have a sharp end and a blunt end. In the middle, everything is different because it's a super yacht designed by a super yacht designer with an owner in mind. So everything is different in there. So when we come on board, we take a look at the SOPs and the training routines with people like Helidex and Mines Rescue and Dagama. And we put them we do the finished filming into a little package called VSOPs, which is Video Standard Operating Procedures, or VTrain, which is video training. So we make a small little app that goes on your iPhone, iPad, or on the ship's server, so you can look at what you've been doing. Now, having the cameras on board gives a certain kind of edge for people because they will think, oh, the camera's in front of me, I've got to check. Now, two things generally happen. One, engineers drop the pants and show their bum and they think it's really funny. and maybe the first 50 times that happened it was. The other one is that the girls run off and get their hair ready. It happens every time. So when we're there, the pressure is on to get it right, because if we can't film it right, if what we film is wrong, we can't show it, because you don't show somebody doing something wrong. People like Candid Camera do that. And quite often the procedures that we film don't always go to plan first time round. There's a lot of little things, as Paul has highlighted, that get in the way, that people have forgotten or just have put things in the wrong place. You know, immersion suits are not put away properly, crane levers stick, cables corroded, medical items not updated, person responsible is away there, the carpet's cleaned with the wrong product so it's ruined, crane suppliers change the pressures, life vests moved to another locker. That's a favorite one. My other favorite one is that the fire extinguisher was removed from the locker because it got in the way of the vacuum cleaner. Now, call me stupid, but you can't really put a fire out with a vacuum cleaner. I haven't tried it, but I guess it's a thing to learn from. So we produce the videos that help assist with these safety manuals, because the safety manual is not a really intriguing read. It's not a bit of light bedtime reading. It has to be read and it has to be understood. But these days, the video can work alongside that as an explanation of the procedures. It doesn't replace the SOPS manual, it just adds to it. And on that point, it's proved itself as an effective training resource over the years. And like I said before, every shore-based company has got this happening. Even the CA, they've accepted it as, quote, a useful resource. And they include a tick box on their audit forms. Now, after 20 years of filming videos, safety videos in the yacht industry, I'm really proud that after 20 years, I've got a tick box on a form. I feel that does me good, that. Now, with the lockdown, here's a chance to get rid of some of the day-to-day pressures and concentrate on these procedures, so you can analyze, criticize, amend, and improve. So here's a suggested exercise. It is just a suggestion. You can shoot me down in flames later. Select an appropriate procedure from the SOPS manual. Okay? Select the team that usually does this. Find an open space, only where the PPP required for this operation. Do not yet use the real equipment required by the procedure. You're going to have to use your imagination and practice a little bit. Switch off radios and phones. Get the team together. Give everyone a printed copy of the procedure. Check everybody reads it. Check that everybody understands it. Ask questions. You know, be a little bit wriggly with the questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? What is an isolator? What does this lever do? What does this product do? Talk it through individually, and then work these procedures through. Walk through the actions slowly, step by step. Follow the scenario as shown without the equipment. And once you've done it, stop and be critical. And the most important thing is to be self-critical. Did I do the right thing? Did that work? And once you've gone through that scenario and criticized it, mix it up a little bit. Change positions. Get somebody else to have a different role. Change roles with people. Change roles with people. Change scenarios. Like the senior crew member is absent. Turn off the electrical power. The captain is missing, presumed injured. The chief engineer is not answering the radio. Make yourself aware of the chain of command from bridge to bilge. There are specific roles in the team that lead to work well. Now, that's how I would look at working through a procedure. Criticize it and amend it, and be harsh with the criticism. Because, difficult to say this, but nobody really gets to the bottom of an incident. Okay, Paul can talk for hours about helicopter incidents, but that's a rarity that comes through. There are a lot of incidents that happen with boats at sea. And because of NDAs and this air of secrecy and privacy, the findings are not always made public. But if accidents were investigated openly, then we could all learn from the situation. But they're not, And so we carry on doing the same sort of thing, hoping that nothing bad is really going to happen. And as you're all young and invincible, of course, you know, nothing bad is going to happen, is it? Honest. So I'll sum things up very quickly because I'm aware I may have gone over my time here. Think about the ramifications.
Ted, don't do this to me. Here you go. You're coming back. Good. Okay, Ted. I think Ted is frozen again. I think we're going back to poor old Fort Lauderdale. But Sarah, you're there and you're ready to go, right?
I am.
But
Thank you.
before we do, there's a quick question to you, Paul. Chris is asking earlier, could you mention who does and doesn't need a certificate for flying? You can put you on your sound, Paul, please.
It cuts me out every single time. Yes, basically, if you have a commercial helipad, so a helipad which is used for commercial charter helicopters, you will need a certificate for that helipad to operate. Okay, and that's what Safeguard Engineering helidecks do. If it's a private operation, there's currently absolutely no rules and regulations on the use of private helipads. You can do anything you want with them. Does that answer that question?
I think it does. And Galina is asking how many cameras on a yacht, including all department, interior bridge and machine room. Ted is not here. Do you guys know, do we need to wait for Ted to come back to answer that question?
If he means the kind of training, the sort of video in the training, it tends to be only Ted. He tends to have a handheld like GoPro and a gyro, and he tends to have a big sort of film camera. So that's all it is really. Okay,
so Galina, no worries, you don't have a full film crew on board.
No, it's just generally Ted and his assistant.
There's no makeup, there's like, it's Ted, and Ted's, and Ted will do great. He's been doing videos for a long, long time.
He wants a dress as well while he films, just put it out there.
Could Sarah, if you don't mind.
Thank you. I'll start my presentation then. Is it working?
I can see you.
What about my presentation?
No. If you got it, that's it. It's on now.
Ono will have come to my rescue. Thanks, Ono. Hi, everyone. I wish I could see you all. One of the joys for me of doing things like this is being able to see people. I think, you know, we're missing people a little bit. Can't see you. So I just have to imagine what you all look like. But I'm hoping that you will chat through this short introduction to some aspects of personality that can really be affecting us as we go through sort of lockdown period, this peculiarity that we find ourselves in the middle of at the moment. So quick intro to me, my name's Sarah and I am one of the partners of Crew Glue. And Crew Glue is a business which concentrates on team building and team development, specifically for high performance teams and teams like you who are on yachts. So crew, hence Crew Glue. And of course, it does exactly what it says on the tin, which is glues your crew together because you're stronger together. So that's me in a nutshell. But what I want to talk to you about today is an aspect of personality that can affect and impact the way we manage ourselves through our change like the one we're going through now, situations we find ourselves in now. And I am absolutely sure that most, if not all of you, have heard of the terms extrovert and introvert. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of additional information about those two dimensions, if you like, of personality, which might help you to clarify in your own head where you're at and also where some of your crewmates, your friends and family might be in relation to this particular aspect of personality. So up on the screen, I've got what looks a little bit like a sort of continuum with far extreme extroversion on one end and extreme introversion on the other. And you'll notice there's loads of dots scattered around on that scale. And that's because it is not an exact science. We are not purely introverted or purely extroverted. We exist somewhere on this line, and that will have been the result, if you like, of a number of things. First of all, we're hardwired from birth to have certain preferences. So you might be left-handed or right-handed. You might stride out with your left foot or your right foot. And those hardwired preferences exist throughout our lives. However, we adapt and we have capability and capacity to move into different preferences as and when we might need to. That includes the introversion and extroversion scale. So most of us probably, in truth, exist somewhere in this middle section. But you do meet the occasional extreme extrovert and the occasional extreme introvert. They're really easy to identify and to understand. But if you want to know a little bit more about how to identify and understand these different preferences, I've got some clues for you to follow. Extroverts then. If you're an extreme extrovert, you already know it. There's no question in your head about whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. But if you're trying to identify extroverts, here are some things that you might identify. They tend to talk more than they listen. And they'll often be that person who, when you're talking about something, will be going, oh yes, oh, I went there, oh my goodness, that happened to me. So they're ready always to interject with some story or something that helps them to connect with you as a human being. And that's the intention behind it. I want to connect with you. I want to show you that we have things in common. So it's got good intention. They're often very quick to respond, and I'll explain a little bit more about why that might be shortly. So if you say, I need some sort of an idea for a special guest dinner, then they'll be, oh, I've got an idea. They're very quick to respond. They'll sometimes interrupt or finish sentences. And again, it's that sort of enthusiasm and desire to connect. And they can be energetic, animated, and expressive outwardly. They have a desire for breadth over depth. Another way of talking about that is variety. So an example of that might be that if you're going out with your very extroverted friend, they'll want lots of other people to come along as well. Not because they think you're boring and you're not enough for them, but because they like a lot of different stimuli, and that means lots of different people, or lots of variety, like tapas versus one meal on the plate. So that external stimuli is really important to an extrovert, and that doesn't just mean people, it means adventure and risk-taking and things that are going to be a feast for the eyes and the ears and the senses. Risk-taking is more prevalent in extroversion, and they enjoy banter with multiple people. They will solve problems by generating ideas through talking things through. So they'll want to get together and bounce ideas around with other people in order to get to the solution or to come up with some new idea, some creative idea. So what about our introverts then? What are the clues to introversion? Well, introverts listen more than they talk and will pause before they respond. And I'll explain why this happens in a minute. They tend not to interrupt or finish sentences. That can be quite confusing for an extrovert because they don't know whether you're listening or interested or not. So they keep talking at you when actually you're processing what they've just said. They have a quieter, calm, more centered energy and seek depth over breadth. So our introverts will often prefer to have a quiet dinner for 2 or 4 people versus a big gathering of lots of people. They prefer to have a deep and meaningful conversation rather than a lot of banter and a lot of chat. Don't need as much external stimuli and are likely to go looking for places that are a bit more calm and a bit more serene in order to re-energize. They're a little more cautious, less risk taker, more risk averse. Doesn't mean that they were not prepared to take risks, but they need time to consider, think it through before they go there. Enjoy a deeper conversation with 1 or 2 people to a lot of noise and banter, and will solve problems and generate ideas by thinking them through, often on their own. So if we look at these 2 next to each other, we can see that they are the polar opposites. These are the extremes, the extreme opposites. And there are a couple of things which happen which cause us to have one preference over the other. But as I mentioned, there is some hard wiring involved here, and brain scans show different activity lighting up in different parts of people's brains depending on their preference. So it's not just made up, it's science. That was a big relief for me because I like things to have a bit of fact sitting behind them. Have a look at those, ask yourself the question, which one's more like me? Some of you are looking at this now and saying, I'm a bit of both. I like that, but I also like that. I just can't decide. I'm very sort of firmly in the center section. And there is something else called an ambivert. An ambivert is sitting so close to that middle section that they're able to flip-flop quite easily between the two, which comes with its pluses and with its minuses, because on the one hand, it means you're pretty flexible. On the other hand, it means you can be really hard to read and people get really confused. Like, what, you want to party or you want to go home? Come on, help me. I need to understand where you are. So that can be both a blessing and a curse, being an ambivert. On the one hand, you're flexible. On the other, it's quite hard to read. You might even get a bit fed up with yourself from time to time because you don't know what you want. So just be aware of that. Now, when you look at these expressions on the screen here, what do you see? I mean, I wish I could ask you and you could actually tell me, and I can't look at the chat at the moment because I'm moving my slides around. But if I just go to the chat for a second, maybe you could tell me in the chat what you see when you look at these expressions.
Yeah, give them a few seconds to answer. Sarah, it's a great question. I looked at that earlier and I know what the second slide is. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So what are they thinking, guys?
What's going on in those heads?
People scared to say anything?
I've got a lot of introverts. The top right is a bit doubtful. The oldest lady is an introvert. Bottom row, middle, resting bitch face. I love it. Thank you, Megan. Yes, it's a real thing. Irritation, po face, trying to work out what you're saying. Is that what you think, Caroline, or is that what's happening on the face? I've done something wrong. Extra. Amazing. All right, good. Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Very nice. All right, let me go back to the slides. So what's actually happening here is that these are all introverts and they're just thinking. Now, as somebody who is just on the extroverted scale, and as a trainer and a coach, one of the things I've always found challenging is when I'm working with introverts and I don't know what they're thinking. It's brilliant for poker. It's difficult when you're communicating with other people who are expecting more of that sort of visual clue about how you're feeling and what you're thinking. So what I would say is extroverts, back off. Introverts are just thinking. That's what's happening right now. They're not necessarily in a bad mood. They don't hate you or think you're boring. And introverts, if you can crack a smile every now and again, just to encourage us extroverts so that we know that we're okay and that we're safe with you, that would be a really nice way for us both to meet in the middle a little bit. So here's the why behind that. When you look at your extroverted brain and the way that it's wired and the way that it works, extroverts think, edit, and talk all at the same time. They literally are saying what they're thinking. They literally have no filter. It's like just straight out of their mouths. Now that, again, can be a blessing and it can be a curse, because on the one hand, we're very quick to think and express what's going on in our heads, but it doesn't always mean that we've thought it through properly before we express what's going on in our heads. And I know you've experienced that either personally or you've experienced it on the receiving end of an extrovert who's just kind of verbally vomiting everything that's in their head right there in front of you. On the introverted side, there's something else going on. The wiring is different. And on the introverted side, we have a thought, we edit. We think again, we edit, we think again, we edit. When we're ready, we speak. So introverts are much more likely to take longer to respond, but when they do, it will have been well thought out. So what does that mean in terms of communicating with your crewmates when you have a difference between introvert and extrovert? Just recognize what's going on and don't keep talking if you're an extrovert. Let your introverted colleague or crewmate or friend or family member have a chance to think about what you've said, create create their response, and then share it with you. Because especially in meeting scenarios, it becomes a bit of a sort of extrovert fest, where all our extroverts have got loads and loads to say, and our introverts are trying desperately to say something that everybody's always said it first because they haven't been given a chance to think it through and then express their thought. So it's really about awareness and just giving each other the space and the respect. So here are some top tips for supporting each other during lockdown. Extroverts need time with people and like to talk things through. So if you can give them that, then that'll be massively helpful. They like a bit of pace and enthusiasm in their communications, and don't think that just because extroverts are extroverting, that they're silly or that they're flirting. The number of extroverts that I've spoken to who say, I'm always being accused of flirting with people, and I'm not, I'm just friendly, I just like to connect. So don't assume. They also like a little bit of alone time. So just because somebody's an extrovert doesn't mean they always want to be full on with people all of the time. They still need alone time too. And when they are surrounded, they like the more the merrier. So they're very inclusive and are happy to have more people, more fun. They enjoy compliments and praise, and they don't mind it being public. And they like direct communication and not gameplay, wherever possible. Be upfront. So subtlety is not necessary with most of our very extroverted characters. You can be really upfront with people that have an extroverted quality. They like it. Variety and adventure is very important to an extroverted personality, but they can be shy. So you can have shy extroverts and you can have outgoing introverts. The difference between the two is confidence. Extrovert does not equal confidence. So a shy extrovert will be timid on occasions and might confuse you if you're trying to read them, but that might be a shy extrovert. Equally, you can have a really confident and outgoing introvert. So it's not about whether somebody is shy or confident or lacking in confidence. Introversion and extroversion is all about where we take our energy from, where we feel recharged, what recharges our batteries, where we take our energy from, how therefore we like to communicate and spend our time in order to feel good about ourselves and to feel happy. Occasionally extroverts have no filter. So if you're working with people, living and working with people who are extroverted and they have no filter, just don't take it too personally and have a little patience with that. And also, if they go off topic, when you start to talk about something, you're trying to have a deep and meaningful over lunch and they go off on some wild tangent because you've been to Tenerife and they've been to 11 and it all becomes a bit of a competition. Just have a little patience. For our introverts then, introverts like to have meaningful conversation. So if you can offer them meaningful conversation, please do. And extroverts don't not like meaningful conversation, by the way. So it's you're perfectly capable of doing that. They enjoy time in calm environments and like to take it a little more slowly with relationships. They're a slow burn. So if you're trying to make friends with somebody who's introverted, don't give up at the first hurdle. Just allow them time to get to know you and to feel comfortable and trust you. Introverts will pick their battles, so they won't always allow conflict to happen. And if you try and make some conflict happen, then your introvert might just walk away from it because they like to pick their battles. And they may need mental support. They spend a lot of time inside their heads, introverts, so may need some support. If you identify that somebody is feeling unhappy or is anxious or is starting to get very low, then it's worth checking in and then making the appropriate recommendations accordingly. Respect their space and understand that they need alone time. And they like to have quality time with people. You don't necessarily have to be talking. You can just be alone together in quiet, and that's good. Accept the fact that that's their introverted preference and don't try and turn them into extroverts. And don't try and make them want to go out with you or go partying if that's not their bag. You can't turn an introvert into an extrovert, and you can't bully them into being a party animal. Don't assume anything about their mood based on their facial expression or their quiet demeanor. Can't make any assumptions, so you need to ask the right questions. They like to have fun, like anybody else does. Fun with people, or happy to have fun on their own doing something if you don't like doing the same thing that they do. They enjoy honesty, and they enjoy a comfortable silence. With my eye on the clock and screaming through this session as quickly as I possibly can, just a couple of points to remember about ambiverts. That for them, it's about everything in moderation. Understand that they are sitting squarely in that central section, and they need to be understood as maybe being introverted today and extroverted tomorrow. Accept that and just read their mood. Value the diversity that exists within your crew. Introvert, extrovert, ambivert, it's all good. It adds colour, creativity, and energy to your crew, and is one of the most wonderful things about being a human being is that we are different, and that those differences really complement one another nicely when we appreciate and respect them. And finally, a couple of top tips. Get out in nature if you can, even if it's only onto the deck. Nurture yourself with good food and with the right kind of reading literature. Don't get yourself bogged down in bad news stories and social media conspiracy theories, because that's not helpful. Remember, it's all about balance. Don't do too much or too little. Bed head, the state of your bed and the state of your head is the state of your head. So if your cabin is in a good state, your head is in a good state, then your head will be in a better state. So this is the time to make sure that you're not cluttering your psyche with a load of literal clutter, because there's enough going on and enough to cope with without adding that additional pressure. Get yourself into a routine that you will enjoy and that helps you feel as if you have an element of control over your day. Control is the thing that we all desperately crave in times of crisis. So take control of what you can, your bed, your head, your daily routine. And one size does not fit all. We are not all the same. Don't treat everybody as if they're the same, because they're not. So that saying, treat everyone the way you would like to be treated, is a bit of a nonsense, because I don't like to be treated the same way as you might like to be treated. And finally, back off, buddy. Give yourself a break. This is a tough time. If you haven't learned a new language, taken up yoga, or just completed an ology in something fancy, it doesn't matter. If all that you come out of this period of lockdown with is a better understanding of yourself and your crewmates, you've achieved a great deal. Any questions, please pop them in the chat, or you can get in touch with me at any point that you need to via a crew or the Superyacht group. Thank you so much for listening, and over and out. Back to you, all right?
Well, not over and out yet for you, Sarah, because well, there's a lot of laughing about Megan's resting bitch face, so that's good. Finn is mentioning that the silence with the introverts sometimes get weird though, and that I get that, especially when you're an extrovert, right? How do you handle that?
What am I looking at?
The one where Finn says sometimes the silence can be weird though.
So is that when you're dealing with an introvert?
Yes,
Finn?
probably. Yeah.
One.
I love the resting bitch face. Introverts. Whose brand is it? I love it.
So let's do a poll. So we'll do a poll. So let's see. And we're going to start a poll to choose whether you're an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert. So I'm going to start the poll now, publish it, and let's see what guys are saying. So let's see what you are. Oh, the introvert. Oh, the first one was an introvert. Oh, here we go. Let's see what we have. Oh, it's
all over the place.
It's all over the place. Let's give them a few more seconds to get everybody get their vote in there. At the moment, there's a lot of ambiverts.
Yeah.
Is that like something that you would expect, Sarah?
Yes, I think so, because most of the population do exist somewhere in that middle area. And, you know, we'll say, oh, I really like socializing, but I also really like anonymity. And there are all sorts of ways of getting closer to whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, but I genuinely believe that those extremes, no, there's no question. Like, I am an extrovert, that's it. I am an introvert, that's it. And then there's a lot of us who exist in that sort of middle area that go, bit of both. But we generally have started from one or the other of those places and then have developed the capacity and capability to move between the two.
Yeah. Well, the end result is 23% of our viewers is an introvert. Then we've got 33% extroverts and 42% ambiverts. And well, I think it's a nice way. I would consider myself an ambivert, to be honest.
You would? I'd say you're an extrovert, or no?
No, I hate to be in public. I hate socializing. I love to organize a party, but I hate to be at a party. Does it make sense? Yeah. Well, Caroline is saying that to get back to the serious part, Finn says, yes, when waiting for an introvert colleague to say something. I think that's like, I get that. Anything you want to, the tip you want to give them?
It is. It's very strange. So it's very difficult because you just want to keep talking or ask another question or kind of look at them. Yeah, come on. Just leave them alone. They're just trying to think things through. You know, I was talking to a colleague who also works in the same arena, if you like, and he was saying that he once had to wait 7 minutes for somebody to respond to a question, but when he did finally respond, it was very well thought out and the response was great. It's uncomfortable if you're an extrovert to allow that silence to stretch, but it's not uncomfortable for the introverted preference people because they are busy. They're busy thinking about it. So the pressure that we put on ourselves to fill the space is more our problem than it is theirs. I know it feels uncomfortable. I've just seen Caroline's life is hard on board for genuine introverts. They're considered weird. We live in an extroverted culture. There's some weird thing that says culturally it's much better to be extroverted. I'm happy to report that that's changing and that there's more and more now being published for introverted preference. There's a really brilliant book called Quiet, The Power of Introversion by an author called Susan Cain. And that's really starting to open up other people's understanding of what it is to be an introvert, that you're not weird, you just think in a different way. And 50% of the population is introverted and 50% is extroverted. So you're not alone.
Good. And then I think the last comment of Caroline is a nice way to end this, and I'm going to put us all on screen again. Most of us have some extrovert in us to leave home. When captains ask why crew are such a nightmare, I remind them of that. I think that's a great line, Caroline. Great line.
It's a very good point.
Yeah.
It's a very good point. Yeah, I know. There's nothing wrong with being an introvert. Have outgoing introverts. Mostly it's about confidence. But building confidence is another session.
Another session, and we'll do many more. Thank you, guys. This was the first one we did with the Superyacht training group. I really enjoyed it. Our apologies about a few little hiccups, but we live in COVID-19. Life is a hiccup, so we'll get through that together. So thank you for all the positive energy in the chat. Thank you for all the understanding. Ted, thank you so much for organizing this and doing a lot of the legwork. Paul and Sarah for presenting such a great session. We'll be back tomorrow with Meta. Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to the learning zone. Friday is a little bit of a day off, and Monday we're doing 2 rounds. Don't forget, Monday morning we're doing mixology. So basically, we're going to set up a full bar. You can even participate. We'll send you a list of everything that you need, and we're going to start drinking at 10:30 in the morning. How cool is that? And so for everybody that wants to join into that, I'm sharing a few files, a few handouts that we have here from Superyacht training group and some other things. So I'm just sharing them. You see them in your chat. You can download them and save them. Thank you, everybody. Galina, thank you for your kind words. Caroline, Tom, same. Bruce, thank you so much. We're going to leave you guys now. Ted, Paul, Sarah, thank you again.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye. Stay safe and healthy.
Stay safe. Very true. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.